Good morning.
Hi, Catherine. Morning.
I am not Cheryl Chandler.
I can tell by the way you dress.
Cheryl had, her sweetheart, Keith, had a medical emergency, and so she's with him. She said she might come and share it, but if she doesn't come, I will definitely put a stone in for her for joys and concerns. So, welcome. I'm Catherine Catabiani. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome, friends, guests, members to our service, those of you here in person and those of you on Zoom. If you're new and watching on Zoom and you'd like to be added to the mailing list, you're invited to type your name and email into the chat box. And if you're new and here with us today, you can stand and introduce you. No, you're old. Yeah, you're off the hook. All ages are welcome here, as you know. Should you need to move about freely, there is that room across the hallway to which the service is piped. So whether on Zoom or here in the sanctuary, welcome. After the service, those of you on Zoom can join your own little chat room, and those of you here in the sanctuary can stay for social hour. Don has set up quite a spread for us, and if you would feel free to contribute $1 or $2 to cover the costs of the cookies and coffee and tea. Special thanks to our Zoom host, Kathy Atwell, who's across the hall, and our sanctuary technician, Bruce Wilde, who has returned early from a special weekend to help us out. For this week's activities, as you know, you can read the weekly update and the newsletter. And I got my Adams cards today, and this is something we haven't pushed in a long time. If you want to buy a $50 Adams card, $5 of that, it's no extra cost for you, and $5 of that comes back to this. There's also a Mother Earth card, and there's also, I didn't realize till I went online to do this, the True Earth fundraiser is still there. So go online, check out these fundraisers. Every little $5 will help us. Come on in, guys. Mark has something to talk to us about.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So you've heard this the last few weeks, and you're going to hear it for 2 more. But Mexico is coming not this coming week, but the following week, from the 5th until the 9th of August. And we are hosting them here in the sanctuary. They will be here in the sanctuary performing on Tuesday, the 8th of August. There's a sign-up sheet there. We're having a potluck, a potluck dinner that night for them prior to the performance. So the potluck will be from 5 to 6, followed by the performance at 6:30. So if you can donate something that your favorite meal or whatever, cookies, desserts, whatever, sign up on the sign-up sheet. Also, we're going to need people to help set up and take down, because I guess, especially if the weather is not cooperative, we'll be eating in here. And then, of course, setting up for the performance. There is a half an hour in between, but I think, I'm sure that the people that are here, that we will all be able to do it. We're still looking for a few homes. We've got several, but I think there's still about 10 children in need if we can. Otherwise, they'll be here in the sanctuary and we'll rotate them around. They're not going to be sleeping out on the streets. You won't see them there. Watch your weekly update, and perhaps next week I'll put up a full list. The schedule for the week is changing constantly, so this is why I didn't become a promoter, because I'm jumping through 1,000 hoops. But they're going to be performing all over Kingston in a variety of places, and obviously I will also make the announcement here when they're performing here for the 2 things that are happening on Wednesday and Thursday, if you want to see them again, and I would bet you will. So if you have any questions or any interest in either hosting or helping out in any way or whatever, you can see myself or Karen Howenstein. What else, Karen?
Well, Paul pointed out, you said August
Oh, I'm sorry, August 6th. Thank you, Paula. No, you're absolutely right. August 8th will be at Old Dutch Church, but yeah, this is where I can't keep track of everything. But August 6th, thank you. It's up there on the board too, in case you don't remember or you get mixed up, but it says the 6th. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Mark. And we have, oh, there she is. Paula has a social action minute for us. We coordinated our shirts.
What does September mean to many people here? Some people that used to, yeah, what about you? What happens in September?
Boringness.
Boringness, oh no, you mean
A million math problems.
a million math problems, all right. And where do you do those?
At school.
At school, I was hoping you'd say that. Well, not everybody,
Fun.
not everybody,
Yes, it is. On the computer. Okay, guys.
not everybody has enough money to buy pens and pencils. So we are collecting for Ulster Immigrant Defense Network, even tissues, because teachers don't have enough money in their budget to provide for school. So if you would like, in the month of August, up until Sunday, August 25th, we'll have boxes out there, and you can bring school supplies. There's a list in the August newsletter. There'll be a list out here, maybe even a handout. But what do you need? Paper, notebooks, pens, all kinds of things. And if you don't want to shop, kids,
Money!
all right. Yeah, you can put that in the donation for the snacks today. Anyway, if you don't want to shop, you can give me money, and maybe somebody else will designate, and we will shop for you. Take all the, if you don't like to shop, all the difficulty, and we have provided so much: backpacks, binders, paper, lots of money. So the goal is to raise as close to $300 as we can, as well as hundreds of dollars worth of goods. So we hope you'll be generous in the month of August. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Next week, our new minister will be leading the service, Reverend Margaret O'Neill. So to find out everything, you can always go to uucatskills.org. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you're welcome here. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religious faith that carries no creed and welcomes all seekers. At UU Catskills, we affirm Black Lives Matter. We are a welcoming and affirming congregation for members of the LGBTQ+ community. We're a congregational affiliate of the Ulster Immigrant Defense Network, to whom we are going to give more than $300 worth of goodies. We are active voices in the effort to address climate change. At UU Catskills, we greatly acknowledge the Lenni Lenape, the native peoples on whose ancestral homelands we gather. So turn off your phones, put aside your concerns, breathe. The opening words that Cheryl chose are from Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is my wish for you. Comfort on difficult days, smiles when sadness intrudes, rainbows to follow the clouds, laughter to kiss your lips, sunset to warm your heart, hugs when spirits sag, beauty for your eyes to see, friendships to brighten your being, and faith so that you can believe, courage or confidence for when you doubt, and courage to know yourself, patience to accept the truth, love to complete your life. The prelude is Carousel Waltz. Who am I now? Okay. Huh. All right, we're going to light the chalice. Yeah.
Those are the magic words.
Okay. You guys want to line up in this little, you're going to miss your chance.
Let Damon do it because he's a
Yeah,
guest.
did you? There you go. Good. That's good problem solving. Okay, if you would like to join me, we light this chalice in grateful, loving community. Even in the darkest of times, may its flame light paths to courage, justice, and hope. Okay, thank you. And if you'd like to join me for our unison affirmation, may we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love to all living beings. May we know once again that we are not isolated, but connected, wonder and joy, to mystery and miracle, in the universe, in this community, and in each other. Okay. Please join me as a community as we sing 128, For All That Is Our Life. And you can stand if you wish. Okay. Not for children only. Cheryl picked out this book, To Everything. And I'm going to hold it up because the pictures are big enough that I think that you can all see them. And this is, it's from the basic idea. I was going to just use, okay. The basic idea is from a passage from the Bible, from the book of Ecclesiastes. But the author and illustrator, Bob Barner, he's altered them a little bit, and it's kind of cool. So those of you who know the original are going to go, wait a minute, oh, that makes sense. So, beautiful end page. To Everything. I love the colors. They go with my shirt. To everything, there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heavens. A time to be born, and you can see the pupa, the butterfly about to be born. and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pick. A time to tear apart, and a time to sew together. And I love this. She's tearing apart its rags, but creating a patchwork. A time to cry, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to give, and a time to receive. A time to hold, and a time to let go. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. You can see that beautiful whale? And which I'll leave this here afterwards because it's really cool. This is all ripped paper. See, it's got this rough edge. It's beautiful. A time for love and a time for anger. A time for war and a time for peace. A time to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heavens. Today's service is about life, and in our lives, there's a time for all of these things. So let's sing them out. As you leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which you learn light your hearts till you return. Okay. So now is a time for joys and concerns. Where did it go? It's all, I would love to put a little bit of like something in between joys and sorrows and just rolling right into give us money. But give us money. The congregation is sustained by your generous gifts. There are several ways to donate to UU Catskills. You can contribute using the donate page on the website. You can mail in a check. There's a QR code in your order of service. You can put something in the basket as it passes. This congregation, as you know, the congregational year, we're contributing to 8 worthy causes through our half-plate donations, so give with an open heart, and the offertory is also from Carnival, If I Loved You. Thank you. Thank you all for your generous contributions to the mystery of this congregation. Now it's time for our homily. This I believe about life, and I would like to introduce our speaker here. Teacher, mother, grandmother, activist, singer, and sideshow dancer, our own Carol Reiter.
This I believe about life had two other people before me, Ken Fu and Cheryl Chandler, and I'm the third. Defining moments of my life. When I think about my life, and my life in particular, I think about all the ancestors I descended from and the stories my mother shared with me about them. For the most part, they were Russians who migrated to Austria with the blessing of a czar and settled outside of Vienna in a place called Eisenstadt, which became my mother's family's name for several hundred years. They were religious practicing Jews with many rabbis and cantors. In the 1870s, my great-grandfather and his wife Joy were sent for by a synagogue in Brooklyn to become their rabbi, and so began the Eisenstadt sojourn to this blessed country. My mother and her two sisters and two brothers were all born here. She in 1906 and the others earlier. Her father, Abraham, my grandfather, was the sexton of a synagogue on the Lower East Side in New York City, as well as a candy maker for Barasinis. When my mother was about 16, she, along with her future sister-in-law, auditioned for and were chosen to dance on the stage of one of Earl Carroll's, well, they were called ponies because they were the short girls, in a show where movies were shown along with the show. My grandmother, Briner, whom I never met, she died quite young, came to see the performance and said, "Oh, honey, Papa would not like this." So she ended her dance career, but not her love of dance and theater. And this, as it turns out, would be something that would continue through her own daughter and her granddaughter, Erin. My mother married my father 1928 or so. He was a recent Georgetown graduate at the time, law school, of course. I actually have a photo of him getting his diploma from Calvin Coolidge. I was the youngest and only girl of their three children. They were practicing conservative Jews. My earliest memories are of going to Kehilloth Jeshurun off 85th Street between Lexington and Park in New York City. When I was about 6, I started Sunday school there. Both my brothers, who were 3 and 6 years older than I, attended there also. As a child, I remember attending services there and wondering why girls and women sat upstairs and the men downstairs. And this was the beginning, I believe, of my questioning conservative religious beliefs and rules, as well as societal rules and mores. My parents listened to the radio in the evening, especially after our stories were over and we were in bed. On one radio program, a Black man in prison who was about to be electrocuted needed a lawyer desperately. And my father was very moved by what he said, and he answered the call and was able to have the sentence changed from death to life. Later on, I believe this was also shortened, and so began what I would begin to understand, that when you hear or see something that feels or seems wrong, you must do something. Ironically, we were living in an area of Manhattan called Yorkville, which before we entered World War II was very German. And Nazi sympathizers were very vocal and proud. As a child, I remember a photo of Hitler behind the counter of our local delicatessen. And across from the synagogue was a block-long German restaurant called Hans Jäger's. Years later, it became Jaeger House. Above the restaurant was a very large room where weddings and other activities took place. I remember one day in the spring, as I came out of Hebrew school across the street, I noticed that brown-shirted young boys, many of them, were standing and their arms were raised in that German Heil, began shouting, Heil Hitler. They were watching a film. You could see all this because at that time, this is before air conditioning, the windows went from floor to ceiling and they were open. It was the spring. We heard the Heil. We saw the black and white film on the screen. It was a scary time. I remember the restaurant continued to stay open throughout the war, and I didn't understand this. My father was an air raid warden, and I remember the nights we all had to turn off our lights and our radios and darken out our windows. And it was during this time that my parents got a divorce. I was probably 7 at the time, about 1944, and my brothers were 10 and 14. My great uncle Ben, my grandfather Abraham's brother, and his wife, Aunt Charlotte, immediately came into our lives in a very big way. They offered my mother an opportunity to work at Aunt Charlotte's corset shop in East Orange, New Jersey, and learn the business of fitting and giving women the proper undergarments for their bodies. That training of a year or two enabled my mother to be hired as a professional fitter in Bloomingdale's flagship store in Manhattan. She would remain there as head fitter and salesperson for 40 plus years. Additionally, she became a very active union member and then shop steward and then vice president. She often took me to her local 3 meetings and to larger District 45 meetings at Astor Place. And she took me with her on marches and demonstrations, and I saw how turning out and telling people why unions helped them and understand what they did had results for workers. Pay raises, paid vacations, days off, fair treatment, good health insurance. In short, it showed me that unions worked for working people, and there would never be a question for me. And as I went out into the world, I would always be a union member. Meanwhile, my Uncle Ben and Aunt Charlotte, wanting me to survive my parents' divorce, introduced me to 2 incredible women who would play an important role in my life. Their lives and contributions are well documented in a film about them, Portia Mansfield and Charlotte Perry, called The Ladies, shown originally on PBS. They met in Smith College as students and remained life partners until their deaths in the 1980s. They became lifters, not learners. Portia gave me experiences one can only dream about. First, she made sure I had dance in my life. I studied modern dance with the great and innovative Hanya Holm, who abandoned modern dance in 1947 for Broadway, choreographing Kiss Me Kate, which won the New York Drama Critics Award. Over the next 18 years, she created 13 musicals, including Out of This World and the London and Tel Aviv productions of My Fair Lady. She became the first choreographer to copyright dance using Laban notation, scored on microfilm. On a personal note, dance gave me a certain physical freedom. Portia was the first to develop the idea of correctiveness, which morphed into dance therapy. She also invented the Western rating system for equestrians. Portia was the first woman to turn in a thesis on film at NYU. The film documented the concerto dances of Mexico. It resides now at the Lincoln Center Library. Wanting me to have the experience of attending their summer camp and theater in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, Portia taught me how to splice 8mm films on dance, as well as the Conchero Dances film, and she paid me 10 cents a splice. I kept track of the number I did. Remember, this is the 40s. During the year-long work, it became clear that more drumming sounds were needed on the Conchero film. So one evening I got on a Grand Central train and traveled up to where Portia and Kingo lived in Carmel to add more drumming. And when I got there, my co-musician sitting on the floor with me was Louis Horst, Martha Graham's musical director and dear friend. Kingo, or Dr. Charlotte Perry, as she was known professionally at Hunter College, where she taught drama, had a children's theater at Hunter College, which I attended for about 5 years. Dance had helped my body learn a language, and my aunt and uncle hoped the children's theater would help me find my voice, because you can't believe this, but I was shy and I could not speak. I attended the children's theater improvisation classes on Saturday mornings at Hunter under the direction of Kingo for 5 or 6 years. She would tell us a bit of a story, and then we would improvise it, arriving at a conclusion. Public school teachers who had signed up for the course were our audience. I think I was there 2 years before I said anything that could be heard. And then when I did, I remember everything stopped, and Kingo came up on the stage and she sort of looked at me like, was I going to have a stroke or something? I had spoken, and everyone heard it. She said, "How do you feel?" I think I said, "Great." Somehow words came out of my mouth that could be heard. This was a door I could walk through, and I did. There would be no stopping me. What it took was support and quiet understanding. I would remember this too. As time went on, I continued modern dance at the Y on 92nd Street, this time getting scholarships and continuing to act in high school. And one of my friends from elementary school, Girl Scouting, and now high school, Jean Houston, and I hooked up again and got permission to start a theater group. We actually put on a school-wide show, The History of Theater in America. It was a lot to do, but we did it. So I had found my voice, and I was able to move, and I saw that through my mother's work and union activities, that working with others was a good way to go, and one could accomplish things. It was around this time that I was 16, 1953, I found the Society for Ethical Culture and enjoyed folk dancing there on Friday evenings. I was no longer attending synagogue. By the time I was 17, I had decided I would like to act, and I applied to the University of Miami and began my studies in theater in January 1955. As a student there, I was able to use my dance background, appearing in Song of Norway and Carousel, and having found my voice, I had an opportunity to act in important roles or leads. Arms in the Man, The Firstborn, Noah, As You Like It, The House of Bernarda Alba, and Yerma. The last two were written by the great Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca. In college, I was approached by a professor who enlisted me to speak with the student government president about the possibility of organizing a mock United Nations. I was able to connect with the student president, and he loved the idea, and it was done. The first model United Nations, along with 2 representatives from 2 embassies, attended and sat with the students representing those countries. It was 1959. In June of that year, I graduated with a BA in theater. It was during this period of time that even though I loved theater, I didn't want it to be my focus entirely. In 1962, after returning to New York, I was able to take education classes and the teaching exam I needed to be able to teach New York City. I was beyond thrilled. I had found my role. I taught third grade, then sixth grade, and then eighth grade. I loved it all. And then in 1966, as a counselor at Camp Madison Felicia in the Hudson Valley, I met Jeff. And that fall in 1966, we married. Jeff was also a counselor at this ethical culture sponsored camp. And Camp Madison Felicia, which is often mentioned by Whoopi Goldberg, and in her very latest book, it's in the second chapter. This was 1966, 67, and 68, and each encampment was attended by racially mixed students from the city, as well as one group that was bussed up from the South. It was an extraordinary experience for us as well as our campers. And once again, we could see that kids can get along in the right atmosphere. On New Year's Day, 1969, my former professor of theater at the University of Miami, Dr. Charles W. Fillauer, and his wife, Emmy, called to wish us a Happy New Year and asked if we might consider coming to Miami for a year to live in their home while they went to Europe on a sabbatical. I think we took about 10 minutes before calling back with a resounding yes. A garbage strike, a teacher strike, a train strike, all helped in that decision process. And so along on July 19th, 1969, do you remember that date? While most Americans were looking at their TV and glued to it, or looking up to the sky, we arrived in Miami and no one looked up or welcomed us. Jeff got a job teaching. I did not, as I was pregnant with our Julie, and at the suggestion of Dr. Fillauer, before they left, we attended the Unitarian Church, and we stayed for the next 49 years. In 1975, a woman came knocking at our door, inquiring if we wished to sell our home. She was from Union Realty, and she wanted us to know that the house that had just been sold on the corner across the street from us had been sold by her company to a colored family. It was all I could do to not faint. I was numb, not because of the sale, but what I knew in my gut she was doing. I waited for her to leave and followed her through our front window. When I thought she had left our street, I ran next door to our neighbor and friend, Jack Leffley, who was a city planner and worked for Model Cities. Knocking on the door, I said, "Jack, I think I've just been blockbusted." From that point on, our life changed. Model Cities got involved. People in different government jobs asked me to go through the neighborhood and ask homeowners if they too had been approached and what had been said. I spent the warm spring and early summer gathering information. Sometime during the next fall or winter, our case was put on the calendar in federal court as a blockbusting case. A young Black man named H.T. Smith, at that time I believe he was a law student. Now he's a well-known attorney in Florida and South Florida. His job at that time was to sit with me outside in the courthouse until we were called. We sat together and chatted, and I remember H.T. saying how fortunate everyone felt in the Black community and amongst liberals, because Judge Joe Eaton was considered liberal and open-minded. With that, we were summoned in for the judge's ruling. "Why, Mrs. Reiter," the lady from Union Realty, was simply sharing some information about your new neighbors. The same as if she was saying they are lawyers or teachers or doctors. This was said seriously and with a very thick Southern drawl. I was afraid I might faint, but I didn't. HT was stunned by the decision also. Somehow I made it home, and I was deeply saddened. The next morning, in the lower right-hand page, page 1 of the Miami Herald, the story ran, "Sometimes, when you think you have lost something, you need to wait and see what happens." After that incident and the court trial, our little area was never again visited by a blockbuster. In fact, our little area, because of its integrated community of white, Black, Asian, and Latino families, we were often referred to as the best kept secret in Miami. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I would wonder if we had a sign on our lawn that said, "All welcome," and they have good coffee. On May 17th, 1980, Arthur McDuffie, a handsome, well-dressed insurance salesman who happened to be Black, was pursued by the Miami police as he rode his motorcycle through Liberty City, and they shot and killed him. They murdered him. The trial was moved to the west coast of Florida, where his murderers were found not guilty by an all-white jury. We knew it was a terrible verdict. That day, my mother had arrived for her annual visit, and when our neighbors and fellow Unitarians asked if we'd like to go down to the Miami courthouse to protest the verdict, which was vile, we said absolutely. We left our children with Grandma Helen and drove down with our neighbors Ruth and George Trencher. When we arrived at the courthouse, it was packed. We joined the crowd of more than 200. We looked across the heads of everyone, and we spotted the only other 2 white faces in the crowd, our minister, Reverend Linnea, and her husband, John Crammell. Well, that really felt pretty good to us, but apparently there was some serious stuff about to happen. We had been speaking with a Black gentleman who, like everyone there, was demonstrating against the murderous actions of the police, and suddenly a car burst into flame. The gentleman said, "Follow me and I'll show you a safe way out." We were able to drive away and return to the safety of our integrated neighborhood as Miami erupted. When we turned into our street, neighbors were out to welcome us back. They had come over to reassure Grandma Helen, my mother, that we would be all right. And we were, but Miami wouldn't be for a long time. The best thing that can be said out of this miscarriage of justice, our minister showed up, but where were all the others? Sometime in the mid-1980s, I returned to my chosen love, teaching. My girls were all in school and I was offered a job. I was teaching 5th grade when an opportunity to flush out an idea from one of the supervisors from downtown was dropped on me, and using everything I knew about the arts, I developed what came to be christened the Trunk Program. Miami at the time had 6 elementary schools that offered classes in dance, drama, art, and music to talented students who got through an audition to be admitted. But what about all the other children at these schools who weren't part of the arts? What about them? Voila, the Trunk Program. I created several camp-sized trunks and thematically filled them with artifacts from different cultures or based on theories. The students would open and unpack the trunks and research the artifacts. They loved it. It became something special in their day too, as other students were going to music or ballet or drama or art. I shared this for a year, traveling between art magnet schools, until the principal I was teaching under was transferred to another school and asked me to go with her and teach 5th grade and bring some of my ideas like Career Cultural Arts Day, which morphed into a week and then was responsible for us becoming another magnet school. I was happy to do this, and it became the highlight of our school's year, these cultural arts days. A few years later, I was asked to teach something new to at-risk 5th graders. The students were considered at risk based on years of low attendance. Our new class, the Comet Lab, would be divided down the middle. On one side was a traditional academic side, and when my students completed their work each day, they could go to the other side, which had different stations introducing them to the world of work. It involved reading about different jobs and then performing related tasks. The students loved going to the other side. Their attendance soared. Within the first year alone, most of my at-risk students achieved perfect attendance. In the beginning, I had 16 students. Each year, I was given more students with poor attendance. The second year, my class grew to 18 students, then to 20, and in its 5th year, I had 27 students. That year, our district director, in her great wisdom, decided we had no more at-risk students in District 5, and they did away with the Comet Lab. I haven't mentioned my teaching philosophy, but in a nutshell, it is, they are all at risk, but teach them as though they are gifted. During this time, I was given the great honor of being named Teacher of the Year 1994-95, and the following year I was named the County Social Studies Elementary School Teacher of the Year. As though that wasn't grand enough, I was summoned to the grand jury in 1995 and was selected as the foreperson of the grand jury spring term 1995. If all this sounds a bit overwhelming, I must admit it really didn't feel that way. I was simply touched by the faith so many fellow teachers had in me, as well as Catherine Fernandez-Rondell, the state district attorney, and the lawyers that were prosecutors on the cases. Being on the grand jury in many ways was the combination for me of all I had ever learned about life: fairness, racial equality, and power. In case you don't know, the grand jury doesn't try cases. They listen to evidence presented by a prosecutor and must decide, in our case, we were 18 members, if there was enough evidence that a normal group of adult citizens would find the charged person guilty enough of a crime to go to trial before a jury of their peers. And if so, the grand jury would sign a true bill. Then they would go to trial. So there it was, this life package of mine. I was sitting with 17 other students, citizens from different walks of life, all weighing evidence and priorities we can agree on to sit in judgment of another of our species. I think what hit me the most was that I felt I was able to listen without prejudice and ask questions and listen to the questions of members of the grand jury and the answers from the lawyer, and be able to come to a fair and just decision. This was not only because of my education that I had received in schools, but the education I received within my family and religious upbringing. In the early morning hours that I treasure as mine, the words of Thomas Merton comfort me. The meaning of life is not found alone. You find it with another. And to those who worry about the future, go and walk through the forest and stop and look up at the branches of the trees in the dead of winter. They are tightly holding to buds, waiting to burst forth in the spring. They trust in the spring. They trust in the future, and I trust the trees.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, we're going to sing Our World is One World, which seems appropriate. 134, and you can rise if you wish. For our closing words from F. Scott Fitzgerald. For what it's worth, it is never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There is no time limit. Stop whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules. You can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. And I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life that you're proud of. If you find you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. So we will extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, warmth of community, or fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. Go in peace and community.